the third Sunday of Advent, which is Pink Candle Sunday, better known as Joy Sunday. In Latin, it's Gaudete Sunday, Joy Sunday. And it's a reminder in the season of waiting, this season of preparation for Christmas, that we're not waiting for a root canal. We're not waiting for something awful. We're not waiting with dread. And we're not waiting on a phone, to argue a bill. It's not tedious waiting. It's joyful waiting. That this is an exciting time. That there is anticipation and excitement to this time. So on this Joy Sunday, it's good to be together. Our gospel lesson this morning is from St. Matthew chapter 11. When John heard in prison what the Messiah was doing, he sent word by his disciples and said to him, "Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another?" Jesus answered them, "Go and tell John what you see and hear. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. And blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me." As they went away, Jesus began to speak to the crowds about John. "What did you go out into the wilderness to look at? A reed shaken by the wind? What then did you go out to see? Someone dressed in soft robes? Look, those who wear soft robes are in royal places. What then did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, 'See, I am sending my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you.' Truly I tell you, among those born of women, no one has arisen greater than John the Baptist. Yet the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." This is the gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
God's grace, mercy, and peace be yours this day through Christ, our Savior and Lord. Amen. The proof is in the pudding. I think we've all heard that phrase before, right? The proof is in the pudding. Familiar enough phrase. I think that's the essence of what our text is about today. But before we get to that, I'd like to share a story with you called "Some Things You Just Know." When my son was small, he liked to sit on my lap and watch television. Sometimes he'd point out what was in the real world: auto accidents, fires, Joe Montana, astronauts, and what was not. Big Bird, for example, belonged to the world of make-believe, as did Kermit the Frog and the Grinch. But so did dinosaurs. Luke had trouble understanding dinosaurs. My explanation that they were once real, but didn't exist anymore, annoyed and perplexed him. If they weren't around now, then they never had been, and that was that. Well, one day, Mama, his great-grandmother, sent him a drawing of a cat she had done. Enclosed was a note that suggested that he color it. She often did these small projects, and he dearly loved getting letters from her. He finished his project, and then climbed into my chair to show it to me. It was red and blue and green. "I've never seen such a colorful cat," I said. "Of course not, Dad," he said. "It's mine and Mama's." As though that somehow explained everything. He nestled against me, and I clicked on the TV to a retrospective of the life of John Kennedy. As a picture of the young JFK at the tiller in a small sailboat appeared, Luke asked, "Who's that man?" "Well, it's John Kennedy. He was president of the United States." "Well, where is he now?" "Well, he's dead." "He's not dead. He's running the boat." The image changed, and we saw JFK giving his inaugural address. "See, there he is some more." "Well, that was a long time ago. He's dead now, Luke." My son looked into my face to see if I was teasing. "Is he all dead?" "Yes." "His feet dead?" "Yes." "His head dead?" "Yes." This last question was followed by a long, thoughtful pause. Then he said, "Well, he sure talks good." Although I tried not to, I laughed because he had been so earnest in examining the problem. After the JFK incident, Luke seemed haunted by the problem of death and dying. Thereafter, almost every walk in the woods became a search for a dead field mouse or raccoon or bird. He would squat down over the find and make up stories about what the animal had been doing when it had died. Sometimes we held small funerals. I was concerned, of course. The idea of death was a big thing for a 3-year-old to get a handle on. One day in the woods, we found a few tawny tufts of rabbit fur. Luke touched them with a sassafras twig. This was Peter Rabbit, he said finally. He was going home to his dinner. A fox ate him up, and now he's in a fox. But Peter Rabbit is in the world of make-believe, I said. This was a real rabbit. Oh, I know that, he said. I was just seeing. I think he meant he was making up a story that would somehow make things turn out better. Most people, I explained, thought only your body died, that another part called your spirit survived. We didn't know that for sure, I said, but if you believe something deep inside, even though you couldn't prove it, well, that was called faith. This produced amazement and an inquiry that lasted almost a week. On one of our walks, I showed him a butterfly cocoon that had once housed a pupa. I told him that a caterpillar had spun a cocoon and eventually a butterfly came out. He accepted that easily because he had seen it on a nature show. Then he said, but you can still see a real butterfly. He goes places. You can touch him. If you're dead, people can only see you on TV. Well, I guess that's true, I said, but you can still see them in your head, in your imagination. He thought long and hard about that one. Finally, he asked me how that could be. I told him to close his eyes and imagine someone who was not with us. His best friend Charlie, for instance. Can you imagine him? I asked. He squealed with delight. No, but I can hear him. Well, it's like that. People who aren't with you right at the moment sort of hang around with you for as long as you remember them. But I can play with Charlie. I couldn't go and play with a bunny. He's dead. Yes, that's true. For another few days, Luke's preoccupation with dead things continued. But then his attention switched to his upcoming birthday party, and he didn't speak of his deep concern again. About a year and a half later, Mama died. It's our Southern family's custom to lay our kin out at home, so my father's mother had to wait. When Luke insisted he be allowed to go, my wife and I thought this would be okay. Mama's house was overflowing with guests and food and talk. She had lived a long, rich life, so there was none of that wretched grief that comes with early or unexpected deaths. People remembered her joy in life, her amazing personal strength, her humor, and her kindness. We didn't ask Luke if he wanted to go into the room where she lay. We let him do as he pleased, talking to people, eating, getting praised, playing with cousins. Then, at almost the last possible moment, he asked if we could go see Mama. I took his hand and led him to stand beside his great-grandmother's bier. He was too small to see anything but flowers, so I picked him up. He took a long look and then said, "Okay, Dad." I put him down and we walked out of the room and down the hallway toward the kitchen. Before we got there, he pulled me into a small room where my grandmother used to press flowers or do needlework. Solemnly looking at me, he whispered, "Dad, that's not Mama." "What do you mean?" "Well, it isn't. She's not in there," he said. "Well, then where is she?" I asked. "Oh, talking somewhere." "Well, why do you think that?" "I don't think it. I know it." "Well, how do you know?" "I just know. That's it. I just know." There was a long pause as we looked at each other face to face. Finally, he said, "Is that faith?" "Yes, Luke. That's faith." "Well, then that's what I got," he said. I looked at him with awe and with joy. I knew he had just found one of the most powerful resources of the heart, a guide other than his mother or me. He had found a way of understanding that would be with him for the rest of his life, even in the valley of the shadow of death. The animated voices of family and friends drifted toward us from the kitchen, where a lavish buffet was arranged on Mama's long oak table. They were sharing stories of an extraordinary woman we all loved so dearly. I looked at Luke smiling up at me, and then we walked down the hall hand in hand to get some fried chicken and to tell a story or two. The proof is in the pudding. The power of our faith is not really evident until it's tested. It's kind of a funny expression, actually. The proof is in the pudding. It doesn't make much sense. It's actually a shorter version of the original expression. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. Now that makes a lot more sense. That you may have wonderful milk and cream and all, and you may be a great cook, but you don't really know how good the pudding turned out until you taste it. The expression means something to the effect that the quality or effectiveness or truth of something can only be judged by putting it into action or to its intended use. Our faith is like that. The proof is in the pudding. And it becomes most meaningful, most real, most powerful when we need to lean on God. When our circumstances are not so comfortable or easy. That's what was going on in our text. John the Baptist, I think this is a really interesting situation. John the Baptist had been out there proclaiming Jesus so boldly, Jesus is coming, you need to repent, change your life, trust him. He was out there boldly proclaiming this day after day, but now he was in prison. Now he was in a cold, lonely cell. And even though he had been so bold to proclaim Jesus as the Messiah on the banks of the Jordan, in his cell, his tune changed a little bit. He said, is this really the one we've been waiting for? A little bit of questioning. And I think it's amazing that Jesus' response says that John the Baptist was one of the most amazing people ever. Among people born on earth, there are not very many that are as amazing as John the Baptist. And even so, John is a questioner. John is one who has to ask in the midst of his trials, in the midst of his challenges, Jesus, is it really you? Which suggests to me that questioning is not at all bad, but that questioning is part of the process that leads us to deeper faith. Are you really the one? He asks. And in essence, what Jesus responds is, well, the proof is in the pudding. The blind see, the lepers are cleansed, the lame walk, the deaf hear. What do you think? And the reality of these things doesn't change John's circumstances. Those miracles may be true, and each and every one of them is a miracle. Those miracles of healing, that kind of power, the evidence of God's power in each of those people's lives, that's great. John's still in prison. The miracle is not that the walls of the prison has broken down. John is still in a cold, lonely cell. But the Messiah is providing hope on a whole different level. The hope of these miracles and the reality of the Messiah is happening at a different level. Jesus comes to offer hope for a whole people, for the whole world, and for all of eternity. He comes to demonstrate what sacrificial love looks like. He comes to paint a picture of how things could be different, which goes beyond our immediate circumstances. The impact of our faith in such a Messiah, the power of this, the significance of our doing our part to try to follow, to try to learn from this example, to try to trust in this God. There are those occasions when we ask, is it worth it? Is this where we should be placing our trust? Is this where we should in fact find our hope? Well, the proof is in the pudding. Advent is a time of preparing ourselves for the God who comes to us. It's what Emmanuel means. We sing, O come, Emmanuel. God is with us. And that's part of the beauty of our faith, is that God knows what it means to be human, to experience hardship, to know what stress feels like, and even physical pain. And the proof of our faith, the power of our faith, comes through when we need to lean on God. When we need to trust in our faith. Trust in the work of Jesus, the work of Christ, the power of the cross. The power of our faith comes through when we have to entrust Mama or Dwayne. And lean on God's promises to us. That our mistakes are forgiven. That our shortcomings are forgiven. That the love of God is always, forever, eternally with us. This is what this season is about. Be reminded of this power. This is what we're preparing for. God to be with us.